Securing commercial clients often starts with that first impression. We've talked about that before. But what does it take to stand out in a competitive market? How can you ensure that your approach is strategic, impactful, and tailored to win trust and business? So, to get into today's topic, I'm joined by Jeff Carmon, who has extensive experience in guiding professionals like you to build meaningful connections and secure commercial work. So, here come some strategies. Jeff, thank you for joining us today.
Always glad to talk with you, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's get into this because this making connections right at the beginning is so important. How can small businesses identify and define their ideal commercial clients so they can focus on their outreach efforts and make that effective?
Yeah, and you said the operative word, and the operative word is focus. So many times I think, and I was guilty of this when I came on, is we really didn't have an ideal customer profile. And so that's the part that needs to happen is an ideal customer profile so that you can have that focus. And then I would say there's three elements of a focus or an ideal customer profile. It's especially in our business where we have to consider the operational aspect of serving customers. So we need to define what geography that we're going to work in, and that might be in 3 counties, or that might be in 20 states. But whatever the case might be, is that geography. The second is what segments or what verticals that we want to work in. So, for instance, at Frantz Building Services, we really focus on manufacturing facilities and outpatient medical facilities and corporate headquarters. And then the last part of it is the size of the building. And you might think, you can look at the square footage of a building, but we tend to look at the number of building users that are in a building. And so, because we say people make messes, the more messes there are, there's more cleaning that needs to be done. And so, for instance, we would look at the number of employees in a manufacturing facility, but we might look at the number of providers in a medical practice or the number of students in a private school. And so those things all come together to make an ideal customer profile. And then kind of the second part of that real quickly is to go to your operations team, take your existing customer list and say, hey, what customers do you feel like that we do a really good job at? Or what are particular verticals that we may struggle in and maybe need to stay away from? So kind of bringing those two things in is a good way to do that.
I find it interesting and cool that you focus in on those segments that you're after, and that helps your team to know exactly what they're doing, who they're after, and all that.
That's right. That's right.
But along with that, I think we've all pitched to people who are not decision makers, and we might learn that later in the
Right.
process. And
Right.
it's like, oops, well, wasted my time there, or maybe you didn't waste your time, maybe you learned something. But let's
Sure.
talk about that, approaching those decision makers that will give you the work you're looking for. What are some strategies there you could share on reaching them, engaging with them?
Yeah, so I think it starts with, and this is where some heavy lifting comes in for commercial cleaning companies, and that is developing a good prospect list. And it seems easy on to say that, but it's a little bit of a challenge. And I think you find the companies that you want to do business with based on the ideal customer profile. And then for us, we've developed their small personas of the types of people in those particular facilities that are the part of the decision-making process. So for instance, if I'm calling on a medical practice, I'm typically calling on the practice manager, or if I'm calling out a manufacturing facility, it's a facilities manager, facilities director. So finding those people, finding those names of those folks and contact information is really kind of some heavy lifting, but it helps in that initial connection so that when you're calling into the company, you don't necessarily have to go around the gatekeeper. You're trying to connect straight to that person. And so as you're making that initial connection to that person who's likely a part of the decision-making process, is having a call or an initial connection framework that seeks first to gather information. And then during that process, if the opportunity comes to make a pitch, if you will, that you're prepared to do that. But that first step is I'm gathering information first, and that may lead to a subsequent conversation.
And you said something there about crafting something, the pitch. Let's
Hmm.
talk about that because that's important. You know, that what you're going to offer them, what you're going to toss their way. How should businesses structure their initial pitch? Talk about that, the introduction, and getting their attention.
Yeah, yeah, and we've been talking about that a lot in our company, and I think it's a kind of a buzzword, especially develop, and that is developing a story. So we all have a story to tell in each one of our businesses. Unfortunately, in janitorial industry, it's hard to differentiate ourselves from one another, but I think everybody has a story. And so developing that story framework, this starts with initially the kind of the who is the focus of the story, and that is the customer. And so understanding as we develop our story that we want to understand the or want to understand the challenges that our customers are having. And so whether that is too many complaints that distracts them from their doing their work, or their reputation within the company because the building isn't as clean as it should be. So whatever problems that they're experiencing, and most people that are buying our services are experiencing the same problems. And so our pitch ought to start with the customer and their problem, and then pull in at the very end how our company is going to be able to solve that problem. And so oftentimes I want to talk about our latest and greatest technology, and that's nice, but it has to come in the context of how that's going to solve a customer's problems. And then I would say the last thing about this is not every opportunity, not every never every conversation we have with a customer is the opportunity to do that pitch. So when we're gathering that initial information from the customer, a good person can kind of read, or someone who's good at this can kind of read whether it is really the opportunity to even do a pitch. And so that's a part of this as well, is knowing the timing of that.
Along with that, I have to think, so you've done all that work, that prep, the pitch is
Mhm.
ready. Then we have to think about where we might meet people and maybe networking events or
Mhm.
perhaps referrals play into this. Can you get into that and talk about the role that those two opportunities might play in this conversation?
Yeah, they're very helpful. And especially I would say it's probably, this is my opinion. I think that's really helpful on a local level. And so if I'm trying to sell services in a local market, yeah, being a part of BOMA, that's a great organization. Any property manager associations that are in communities, but even things like chambers of commerces, those are great ways to get connected to people in the community that are a part of or in buildings. And so those are great opportunities. And again, going back to how do you leverage those situations, I think it's become involved in the organization, be an active participant in the organization, and be ready with that story that we just talked about. So when the opportunity comes, that you're able to talk about how your company solves building owners' problems.
You know, Jeff, you and I have known each other a while, and we've met at ISSA show in person.
Sure, sure.
I trust what you say,
Mhm.
but I think trust is something that takes time. So when with today's topic, are there some ways we can make that happen quickly so we can get to the next level with a potential client?
Yeah, and I think that's incredibly important to do, is establish that trust, and you've got a really short window to do it, just like what you meant. I think the first piece is be prepared. I think preparation is the key. So if you're going to an event, or you're picking up the telephone call, or telephone, or you're submitting an email, preparation is the key. And what I mean by that is know what kind of company you're calling on, and what that person's role is at that company, so that when you call them, you can have a good understanding of what they do and what particular problems they're going to have. So that's preparation. Then having a framework. So a framework for when you're making that initial connection, that maybe that's a call or an email, but to have a flow of how you're going to reach out to people so that you can be a good steward of their time. And then really, again, go back to know your business and know your story. And so practically speaking, how we've done that is we've just developed a list of responses to common questions, so that if you are in a situation and somebody asks you a question, that you're able to respond in an educated way, so that person says, this person not only is trying to serve me, but they also are an expert, or at least they seem to be an expert in their field as well.
This has been good advice. I'm sure those watching are going to up their game when it comes to that initial contact, that early in
Yeah.
the relationship part of selling. Any final thoughts or strategies you can share with us as we wrap it up?
Yeah, I guess here's what I would leave you with, is just like anything that we do in life, and it really comes into play here, is the way to build trust, the long-term way to grow your business is to start with serving people rather than selling to them. And so when you take on that mindset of saying, hey, I want to serve you in any way possible, and if that means ultimately that we get to clean your building, then that's a bonus. And so when you approach it in that manner, I think everyone wins.